So without further ado, let me invite Dr. Ang to come up and do his opening address. As I mentioned earlier, Dr. Ang is the Deputy Secretary of MCCY, leading the ministry's efforts in Singapore Cares, the national movement to foster a more caring, compassionate, inclusive society. And he's concurrently appointed as the Commissioner of Charities and Executive Director of the Registry of Cooperative Societies and Mutual Benefit Organizations. Prior to these appointments, Dr. Ang served as the Chief Executive Director of People's Association from 2013 to 2017. He was previously the Chief Executive Officer of the Health Promotion Board, which oversees national health promotion and prevention policies, and has served in the Singapore Police Force and Ministry of Home Affairs for more than 30 years. Dr. Ang is also an adjunct professor at National Technological University and also the chairman of the Singapore Quality Awards Management Committee. Dr. Ang is a fellow chartered accountant of the Institute of Singapore Chartered Accountants. So without further ado, Dr. Ang, over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Elsie. Good afternoon, my brothers and sisters. First, I must thank CNPL and Rotary Learning Institute for organizing today very important topics known as board succession planning. And before I start my presentations, I like to tell you a story. And the story goes like this. Once upon a time, there's a donor who wants to donate $1 million to, and you don't know which charity to donate. Charity A has a board, and this board comprises people who are very distinctive. People like Gerard E, people like Phillips, and many others, even people like Prof. Vasu, you know. And the interesting part of this board is the board leadership is very committed, very able, and able to sort of lead the organization. But then the competing charity, Charity B, while the board is not so gilat, the board is not so good, but the charity managed to have a secret formula. And this secret formula actually helps many of our seniors to be fiscally active in the outside world. You know, this is a secret way of training. And it's something that is very much desired by many of our senior citizens. So this donor scratched the head and say, should I donate in Charity A, which have a very good board, but programming is so-so? Or do I invest in, or I give it to Charity B? The board is not so-so, the board is so-so, but programming is gilat, very good. So my brother and sisters, you have the $1 million. Who will you invest or who will you donate? Charity A or Charity B? My brother and sister, if I have the $1 million and if I want to donate, I will invest or donate in Charity A. Why? It's very obvious. While Charity A may not have the secret formula, but Charity A has a board, have a leadership that is able to create the secret formula. Well, Charity B, once the secret formula expired or hit by a contingent such as COVID-19, today with COVID-19, whatever old formula you have now become irrelevant because we have imposed a lot of measures to protect the citizen, such as asking the senior citizen to stay at home. That is the reason why board leadership is so important, because board leadership, it has the capacity and ability to create, overcome, innovate, even something when they don't have, they are able. So if you agree with me that board leadership is very important, the next questions that you have to ask yourself is that why board still fail. Board leadership is important, but why it still fail? So I did some research, and I found that one of the reasons why board fail is because they fail to innovate. They fail to stay relevant to the changing environment. The world is changing, my brothers and sisters. What used to be an asset some 10, 20 years ago, today can turn into a liability. So we must innovate and change, even in the people sector. Why didn't we change? One of the reasons is because the board gets stagnant. You know, when the board, one of the reasons why the board gets stagnant is because some of the board members overstay. My brothers and sisters, in terms of board successions, we have a problem of overstayer. The question is, how come there are overstayers? So I went around talking to a lot of non-profit sectors. And there are three reasons why there are overstayers. Three reasons. First reason why there are overstayers, people always tell me, hey, not that I want to change. I got no one to change. I call it no candidates. No one to take over. What can I do? So that is one reason. Second reason is, yeah, I got someone to take over, but the chemistry is not right. No chemistry. Boygam, no chemistry. You know, and the chemistry can be in terms of value, personality, and whatnot. The third reason is this. Oh, the overstayer are important to us. The overstayer are the one that bring a lot of assets to the board, such as donations, such as expertise, because he know the charity or know the sectors or know the social enterprise for the last 50 years, cannot change. Actually, my brother and sister, these are valid reasons. You know. Trust me, I'm not belittling this reason. These reasons are often cited by our non-profit sectors. So my question to you is this: how can we address this problem? This problem of board succession failure due to lack of innovation that is caused by overstayers. And that is the reason why board succession is so critical, particularly in building up the leadership pipeline. So how to build a leadership pipeline is the topic of my sharing with you this afternoon. There are three things you need to remember in order to ensure a good leadership pipeline. First, identifications. You must always, at all times, continue to identify successes. Even when you're doing very well, especially when you're doing very well. When you're doing very well, you have the bandwidth to think, to search for succession. You don't wait until you hit a crisis, then you look for succession. Too late. In fact, I will put it to you. If you are seriously believe in successions, for every one critical post, like a chairman, the chairman of the financial committee or audit committee, or chairmen of the nomination committee, you must always have three potential candidates. Always remember, for one core post, you must have three candidates. And if you don't have, how? Hey, this is where you must look for the organizers, known as CNPL. The job of CNPL is to help you to do board match. I noticed when I say this, Kitchen is nodding the head. So this is called offer and acceptance. Please call him. The next important task is called preparation. We like to give the excuse of no chemistry. Boygam. It's because why? When you parachute somebody in a non-profit sectors, without good socializations or onboarding, you are building for conflicts. My brother and sister, If today I ask you to buy a car, what do you do? Will you just go online and buy a car? Some of y'all would lah, but I won't. To buy a car, first I must do what? I must test drive the car. Only after I test drive the car, have the feel, then I will buy the car. Similarly, for someone who are new to the organizations, first, you must what I call socialize him. How do we do that? I'll socialize her. Instead of parachute straight to be the main board, perhaps you may want to consider first, maybe let him have or her to have an experience in the subcommittees. And then after 6 months, then maybe to chair the main of the subcommittees. And then after that, to sit in the board. And then after that, take key positions. My brothers and sisters, chemistry don't take place instantaneous. For us involving in non-profit sectors, you cannot have instant board members. You must make sure to be fair to you and to be fair to the person, you must have a good socialization program so as to allow both sides to test the car. The third is transitions. My brothers and sisters, there's a reason why overstay. And sometimes we are very bad. If we do not think through of the transition between the old and the new, what is the outcome? We push the overstayer onto the cliff. In other words, take the car. When Singapore, when the car after 10 years old, what happened to the car? Sometimes we send the car for what? We send the car to scraps. We scrap the car. So are you saying that the overstayer who has served in your non-profit sectors for the last 20 years, and now because you need to refresh, you tell him you are out? You know what will happen or not? You are sending a signal to the new one who is sitting on his seat that when your time is up, you will have the same treatment. How do you get loyalty out of this? Instead, what you must do is to make sure that you ask the overstayer, tell the overstayer need dignity, treat them with respect. It's not about sending them to the scrapyard, but it's to tell them that please help the organization. We still need you, but step aside. It's something that I learned a lot from our minister mentor, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. Even when he stepped down as a PM, he stepped aside, continued to mentor the new minister. Similarly, for the overstayers, that must be something that we must learn from them. As I say, the overstayers have value. When you come to certain contingency, things that you have not faced before, that happened in the past, their experience matter a lot, such as the fights against COVID-19. So my brothers and sisters, it's very important that we ensure that there's a proper transitions between the old and the new, but more important to ensure that the goodwill of the old is transferred to the new, and at the same time ensure that we treat the old with dignity and respect, because that's a signal that we're sending to the new when the times come. So my brothers and sisters, in conclusion, let me recap. I share with you the importance of board. And I tell you that boards have the ability to create, even though they may have the difficulty now. Good board able to create and overcome challenges. And the reason why board fail is because of fail to innovate. And the reason why it failed to innovate because the board gets stagnant. And one of the reasons the board gets stagnant is because of overstayers. And overstayers give you 3 reasons, i.e. no candidates, no chemistry, no friendships. But you can overcome it with a good leadership pipeline, focusing on 3 core processes: identification, development, and transitions. as the chairman of the Educare Management Committee, I want to promise you this. And that is that I will walk the journey with you. For a start, for those of you who say that you have no candidates, we will help you. Please go to CNPL for help. And if CNPL cannot find the right candidates, we will go to other people because CNPL is very well connected. Number two, you need a SOP. You need to what I call hard code succession planning into your organizational process. For that, if you need money to develop the SOP, please apply for our capability building fund. I'm most happy to support you in this very important area. And third, we will continue to conduct lessons in this important area known as board succession planning. Please attend the sessions. Sessions are usually conducted by CNPL, SID, and even SUSS. So please attend, because sometimes it's not because we don't want to, it's because we don't know how. And sometimes even you know how, you are unable. And since if you know how, and if you want, you are unable, please find us. I'm most happy to support you. As I promise you, I will walk the journey with you. Thank you, and you have a good afternoon. Thank you, my brother and sister. Over to you, Caris.
Okay, now Doctor, I think I should take over from here. Thank you very much, Dr. Ang. Next, I would like to bring you, Dr. Vasu, the Emeritus Professor in the Department of Social Work, National University of Singapore. You can see from here, he has a very long set of credentials with a great deal of experience in the different boards and in different aspects of social studies and social work. I think that, for the presence of time, we shall just move on and get him to start sharing with us right away. So over to you, Dr. Vasu.
Yes, thank you, Elsie. Thank you, Hak Seng, for giving your viewpoints and all that. I'm glad to be here in this seminar. It's a virtual seminar, so you can only hear my voice. You can only be able to size up what you're hearing, but nothing like interacting with people. I think succession planning is basically appreciating and understanding the issues that are faced by key board members in the organization. Now, for me, I think, as you all know, I think there are about 84 participants for this seminar, quite a sizable number. And I hope that all of you would be able to share your viewpoints and take home what is essentially helpful to you and for helping you to find meaningful ways to bring about renewal to your organization. I mean, it's always easy to talk about renewal, succession planning, because we're all rational. Nobody here would disagree with you that we all need to have succession. But then succession comes with a lot of problems, with a lot of issues, with a lot of challenges, I would say. I think we need to really appreciate. And what we need to do is to appreciate that there are different, I'm giving you a keynote address. You may be able to listen to my notes, but listening to notes is not sufficient enough. You must hear what type of notes your members in your organizations are delivering. Some succession notes are very hostile. If you can read it. Some are very punctuated. They don't give you any viewpoints. They are punctuated in their notes. Others are very disappointing notes that you may hear, because in succession, some people will be disappointed because you are trying to say long stayers and all these should also find a way out. And they will be disappointed. They say, why should I get out? Why not others? I'm equally hardworking. I'm contributing. So you have all that. And then you have very hostile nodes, people who are hostile. They are not happy with the way you deal with them, to usher them out of the organization, to replace them, to find other successive people who may not equally be as good as them. And they are people who have served your organization for some time, and they are there. They know the history, they know the development, they have been tied with the organization for some time. So as I see, you all will appreciate that succession planning is a very complex human issue. The human factor is the most important thing that we need to deal with. It's very easy, for us to say succession, we find people. But there is the psychology, there is a psyche to the group of people that are working in the organization. And one must be able to manage these human psyche, human factors. And they are always very complex and very challenging. And unless and until you appreciate what are the human dynamics to bring about change, your succession planning will not be effective. It will be in paper effective. You have some faces coming in, but the question is whether they can contribute to the effectiveness, to the development of your organization. So you can bring change, but ultimately, is this change going to make your organization any better or not? So these are some of the things that you need to review in your succession planning. There is always also, besides this human factor, there's also this whole issue about social cost. In all succession planning, people who are involved in your leadership, when you replace them, there is a social cost to your organization. Don't forget that. There's a social cost to the individual. The longer they've been involved, the more they have contributed. It's a big, tremendous social cost to them, social psychological costs. And what are the implications of these social costs to your, not only to the individual, which to me I think is very important, but also to your organization as a whole. So sometimes in succession planning, we tend to overlook these things. And social cost to me is a very important aspect. And worse still is a sunk cost. And every individual who is involved in your organization has put in a lot of effort, put in a lot of energies. There is a sunk cost there. And what is this sunk cost? Sunk cost, the more the sunk cost is, the more entrenched it is. And if you want to just relieve him, you want to get somebody coming in, it is going to be very trying and very emotionally charged. So you got to also look at the sunk cost dimension to this succession planning. The greater the sunk cost for the individual, the more trying and more challenging the issue would be. So you got to look at that. Then you need to also look at the issues about whether the individual who is managing succession or they are being succeeded, there is this whole issue of attachment and loss to the individual. Individuals are bonded, don't forget, to their organization and to the team in which they work. The moment you want to get them out, there is a loss. There's a breakage. The bond is going to be truncated, or you're going to change the bonding of the individual to the organization. And he's not only bonded to the organization, but he is also bonded to the people that he works with. So breaking the bond does lead to attachment and loss. Loss in their attachment, and also they are being affected by this loss, being attached and being bonded to the organization. So how can we therefore, as I would challenge you, is to be able to look at how to enable an effective renewal process or succession process. I think you may want to ask that. What is it that will enable us to bring about an effective renewal process? There are a few things that you have to take into consideration. One is to be able to understand the demography, the dynamics of the people that you are going to bring to renew in your organization. And if you look at these whole aspects of the demography, understanding the demography, making a social analytics and analysis of these dynamics, demographic dynamics of organizations, very important. So Arthur, you may want to just show them the demography. In succession planning, you need to appreciate this. What are these? Therefore, if you look at the landscape, the social landscape of your organization, you will understand that in many cases, the organizations are tied up. So maybe, Arthur, can you show the things? The first slide. Where is that slide now?
We have to get back to screen share first.
Yeah.
Um,
The board, the profiles of the board. This is the last one, the first one earlier. Okay, next, yeah. Okay, let's look at how many board members fall in the age bracket. You look at your organization, about a very high number, almost about 30%. If you look at it, if you look across that, more than 30%, almost I think about 50% of your people in the charities, the NGOs, are 50 and above. And this number is growing. You see the orange, the numbers of people who are graying and who are becoming old. As Aksing says, there are overstayers there. But the question is whether overstayers, whether they are overstaying, is overstaying good, is an issue that you would ask. If overstayers are really contributing to the organization, never mind, let them overstay because they're contributing to your organization. No point, trying to tell them, hey, friend, it's high time that you leave. They will be very sore. So you look at that. Average, you can see organizations are graying, board is graying, but does it mean that it'll do organization any better if we bring in younger people? Maybe, you can bring in. I'm not saying that you cannot bring in, but how do you bring in? At what points do you bring in? How do you therefore dovetail them, induct them into your organization? Next slide, I think. Second one is if you look at it, the diversity of the board. There are more males than females. Females have crept up slightly. There are 35%. About 1/3, I would say, are female. About 2/3 male. But I think it's a good thing for organizations, for the board, to bring in more females into the organization, at least 50-50, maybe, more female participation. There's a gender bias there. And some organizations, because it's male dominated, so males tend to be a bit more biased. They will bring their own kind into the organization. But I think organizations need to look at it because the higher the gender participation you have, higher female participation may bring a difference to the organization in terms of its perspective, in terms of the outlook, in terms of the contribution. Therefore, being male bias, I'm not saying that I'm biased for males to be involved, but a different perspective is really necessary. And it adds. The question is, does it value add to bring in a higher number of female into your organization? I think it will value add to your organization. Next one. Let's see what is the next one. Next one is to look at how long, how long have they been with your board? Are the board engaged in succession planning or not? I think as you can see, the numbers are going down, 2016, the numbers are going down compared to the earlier years. So I think partly it is due to life cost of the organization, but by and large, I think many boards don't have succession planning, and only about, if we look at it, 2016, only about 44% say that yes, but there are no formal process, no process in which they think through how to succeed and what strategies and how to bring about succession. Next, I think the last slide, you can look at it. How many board members do your organization have? You can look at it. An average, most organizations have between 10 and 10 plus members. So on an average, most organizations have between 10 to 16 members. It is reasonable. Some organizations have 20, but by and large, I think a board size of 10 to 16 would be essentially sufficient, or helping the board to be able to discharge its work. And that, I think, is something that you all have to think about. What is your board size? What makes it useful for members to gel, for board members to work together as a group? Now, let's go back and see what is it that that can help us. I think I will change this slide and then give you some points as to how and what can be done to bringing in succession to your organization. First, I think you have to look at, by and large, the whole hollowing out process in your organizations. Is your organization losing people? People coming in and then after a while, they get tired because they are not assigned responsibilities. And we often bring in people, but then there is a hollowing out process that not only affects your organization because you're losing talents, because people are going out of your organization in big numbers, in some cases in smaller numbers, and the longevity of your board members, you got to look at it. Why are people leaving 2 to 3 years, or within the next 1 year they join the organizations, they join the board, and then they then resign, or they leave your organization and then go to some other organizations. So you have to therefore look at the issues related to why people are leaving. And it's easy to bring in people, but what will help them to stay, to be anchored in your organization? More often than not, many people who are brought into the organizations are very small in number, and they get overwhelmed by the older members of the organization. They don't fit in, they don't anchor in, and there's very little process in trying to induct them, trying to assign them the challenges, the responsibility to contribute to the organization. So in short, I would say board successions, if you look at it, many boards, they keep beautiful minutes and waste a lot of hours. And all board meetings, I think people talk, people discuss, and then at the end, they go back to the same things, the same old routine. And there is nothing that becomes very proactive, very challenging for the board to be engaged in. Then what can be done to enhance the implementation of your renewal process? What steps can you take? I think this is an issue that that we are all very keen to look at. First, I think it is important to promote self-help. And today, most organizations that you work with and we are involved with are outsourcing a lot of things. We are subcontracting, we are outsourcing. We are getting a lot of contractors, subcontractors to do the job. And so much so, the board members are not engaged, not participating in the development and the growth of your organization. So when board members are not really engaged and they're not involved in self-help and helping the organizations to grow, then I think people after a while, they get tired. What are we doing here other than coming to your board meeting, monthly meeting, passing minutes? Besides passing minutes and getting your accounts through, there's nothing much challenging to do, and to do fundraising and other related stuff to make sure the organization continues running, but maintaining the same old thing. Then you have to look at what can be done to anchor. I think, how do you bring in younger people to come in? I think many boards that I am aware of bring in younger professionals, younger people to come in to be involved as volunteers. Then the issue is that many of them don't stay that long. They are not anchored. I think it's good to bring them in, but is there a mentoring process? Do you look after them? Do you engage them? Do you help them to be bonded? Do we assign them responsibilities, giving them challenging tasks to do? These are some of the things that I think in board renewal, one has got to look at this. And most of the time, people leave because they are not given challenging tasks. They are not given assigned responsibilities. Or if so, they are assigned too many responsibilities because they are hardworking. And when they're hardworking, they get pumped in, or they got pumped up with a lot of things to do. And then they get burnt out very quickly. And they get tired. And they get what you call compassion fatigue and leave the organization. So what is very important that we need to do is to be able to assign them challenging tasks to do, tasks that are problem solving, tasks that help in terms of organizational development, tasks that will help them to review what directions the organization needs to go. And these are very meaningful tasks. And more often than not, I think all the boards that I know of and all the boards most of the time are engaged in routine kind of functions. They don't introspect. They don't look at what are the changes in the social landscape out there and how do we get our organization to respond. So what you have is most boards to me are what you call NATO type of organization. NATO means no action, talk only, right? So you go to board meetings, minutes are passed, you pass the minutes, then matters are rising, and then what are the budget required, who is going to raise the money, how to keep the organization going. Nothing challenging to me. They are important, but not challenging enough for younger professionals, for people that you want to bring in. It's not challenging enough. They're all very mundane, routine kind of things. Unexciting, to attract people who are professionals. You want them to contribute. So what can we do? You have to handle Succession, yes. You bring in people, yes. You have to also deal with people that are going to be relieved. How do you deal with these people that you are going to retire? The long stayers, how do you therefore get them to change over? I think you have to do it in a very humanistic way. Sometimes we tend to be very task orientated. Their terms are up, and therefore you try and say that we will bring in somebody else, and then you don't handle and manage them well. So there is this issue, of bonding, and there is this. I would say that any board member that you are trying to renew, trying to retire, they are affected by grief and loss because they have been with your organization some 20 years, some 15 years, some more than that, some grow with your organization. And to relieve them, to retire them, they are affected by grief and loss. And when people are affected by grief and loss and you don't manage them properly, you just deal with them in a functional way. And because they have reached their term or they have been staying too long there, then it is a very inhumane process that one deals with succession planning. So you have to think of how do you deal with it, because there is a human psyche there, which is to me very important, because all the people who are involved in your organization for succession planning are people who have put in their effort. They have been anchored to your organization. And there is an attachment to your organization. There's a bonding. There's a fellowship in the organization. And therefore, how do you retain these people? Do you therefore retire them? Or there are good areas that they can still be involved? How do you anchor them, continue to anchor them? Can they be resources to your organization? To me, I think they can be tremendous resource to your organization. And we don't tap these resources because they have the experience, they have the network, they have the connection, they have the bonding with others in your organization. They know the workings of your organization, how to reserve this, how to preserve this, how to tap this and help them to continue with your organization at a different level. They can be advisors, they can be resource persons. Are there any ways that you can make use of them? I think there are a lot of ways in which you can tap their expertise. Then do you have a good exit plan or not for these people? It's always good that we retire people, but do you have a good exit plan? Do you manage this exit plan and deal with this human dimension very carefully, very sensitively, because it's a whole sensitive process. And dealing with volunteers, you are not dealing with employees of your organization. And sometimes in organizations, we tend to treat them like employees. They are volunteers who have been there, and they will ask those that are retiring them, how long have you been there? I've been longer in this organization. And there is this whole issue of loss and grief that as leaders of the organizations, you must help manage. If you can help manage to deal with it, then you have a real good exit plan. Exit plan in terms of how to deal with them, how to manage them, how to deploy them in areas that you think they can still continue to help your organization. I think ultimately you have to think about creating a different layer of people coming to your organization. You do not have to completely have people coming in, but you can always have different task groups in your organizations, subcommittees or working committees, to be able to bring in younger people into your organization. This is one way you can do in enriching your organization, value add to your organization's work. And by bringing in these people, younger people, and deploying them into various working committees or review committees or committees that can look at service delivery, looking at outcomes of the services of your organization. If you can deploy them into different working committees where their talents, their expertise are tapped, then your organizations become enriched. Your organizations become development orientated, become more effective by tapping people, inducting people, and bringing them into your whole renewal process. And that is what renewal is all about. You bring in people to be inducted and deploying them into areas because you give them time to mature, give them time to understand about the dynamics of your organization, help them to build up fellowship in the organization. And through all this process of deploying them to manage different tasks that can help your organization to grow, you therefore can help a younger set of people to be anchored into your organization. So finally, I think the whole issue of succession is dealing effectively this human dimension, the human interest, the human psyche, for which we sometimes neglect because we think that they are volunteers, and therefore as volunteers, they can be dispensed with. We can bring in other volunteers in. And when you treat volunteers as if you're dealing with a business organization, it is not going to help you to enrich your organization and to help your organization to be viable. So most importantly to me, in succession, for organizations to be able to think through how to have a good exit plan, how to manage griefs of people, loss of people, and breaking this bond that people would have, how to redeploy them to continue for them to serve your organization in other ways in an effective manner. You need not have to just shun them off and then don't utilize the talents that these people have because they have contributed to the life of your organization. They have been there very long. So it's easy to just relieve them, but you don't have a good makeup for your organization. You don't create a viable organization by dispensing people as a result of succession. Thank you very much. That's about all.
Thank you, Dr. Vasu. Next, we will bring on and have Ms. Lilian Ang, who is going to present to us, this topic on succession planning. She is currently a board member of Rinchi, as you can see from here. And, she has been actually awarded and commended, for her efforts in building up excellent labor relations before in SCI. Over to you, Lilian.
Thank you, Elsie. Let me start by thank you, Dr. Vasu, Dr. Ang. I think really very, very interesting share of insights. For me, I will really talk more about the process of it. But before I start, let me just share some screen first of my slides. Yes, thank you very much. I've got that. So basically, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the process and the steps of succession from a content angle. I'm very happy that Dr. Vasu has already spoken at length on the human elements and the human psychic. So wrapping around all this, really the process of how we can go about understanding the steps of succession, and as well as understanding all these key competencies. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, understanding succession planning. I thought that I want to start by just highlighting in my presentation what succession planning is all about. Simply stated, it's really a strategy for identifying and developing new leaders who can replace the existing ones. It could be when they leave, they retire, or something else has happened. But succession planning is not about immediate replacement. It is also about increasing the availability of experienced and capable board members, as well as, if you extend it, it's the same process that you use for your employees, so that everybody becomes adequately prepared to assume these leadership roles when they become vacant. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the steps of succession planning. Next slide, please. So basically, why do we do? Obviously, the first reason is contingency planning. There is an unexpected departure. But more importantly is really in terms of continuing our MPO's service delivery. We also want to continue to engage our stakeholders, especially in fundraising, which is really at the top of a lot of our minds. The other thing is not forgetting retention, especially when there are a lot of limited resources already. You also want to be able to come up with some retention strategy for your board members. Not all are overstayers. And lastly, but very, very importantly, is you want to maintain the vision and the mission of the organization. A lot of MPOs may not have spent a lot of time doing this, but really maintaining a vision or creating new visions when environment changes become critical function of the board. In terms of a typical succession planning, it's just whether it is, this is a very typical succession planning model which most HR people will use. Really, 6 steps, the board can use exactly the same one, so can the employees and the leadership. Really, the first 2 steps are identifying the critical positions and developing success profiles. But how do you know what are your critical positions? And how do you develop this process? 3, 4, 5, really assess and develop. And the last is review, assess, review, adapt, and then it goes in circle. So I'm going to share this with you. Just now in the chat, some participants have been talking about a code of governance. Yes, the Charities Act has a code of governance. And I thought that this is the starting point of identifying the competencies that you require for your board. So really, it is not something that we need to pluck out of the air. It is already there. Okay. Then if you look at the competencies required, again, I lift this from the Charities Governance Act. If you look at the board committees, it's already, I wouldn't say mandated, I would say already suggested and recommended that depending on the tiers that you are at, you should have this relevant type of committees. Straight away, if you look at these committees, audit, finance, programming and services, fundraising, nomination, that in the enhanced tier already, the nomination committee is already there. The human resource committee and the investment committee. These are already the basic requirements. So if you are at the respective tier, you already know that your board members should have some of these competencies. Now, for example, in Ren Si Hospital, we obviously have all this, but we have gone a few steps further. For example, because of our strategy, and we want to be able to enable many things via technology, we have a IT committee. IT committee headed by a volunteer who is chairman of one of IT companies in Singapore. So he's able to bring with him the relevant skills and talent to the board. So my suggestion is when you look at the competencies needed and the skills needed, our talents we require for your board, don't restrict yourself only to whatever is recommended. Look at your own strategy. What is the board strategy in the next 5 years? That gives you a very, very good basis for deciding what kind of new competencies at the board that you need to bring in. And just now, Dr. Vasu talked about the human aspects of it. Are the board committee members going to be challenged? For example, for me, I'm in the HR committee. of Renci Hospital, we are always challenged because we need to review pay scales, we review policies, to make them relevant in today's world and for tomorrow's world. So you're always challenged to do more and more things, not just leaving things as they are. So so this is really a very quick of what competencies do you require. Now, assessing the current. Succession planning can become very, very critical, especially when you have impending retirement of the board members. We talk about overstayers just now. In the chat group and in the Q&A, we talk about, is there a length of time in which board members should stay? Hak Seng suggested 10 years. In the public listed entities where I used to come from, about 9 years, 10 years. Why? To really, this is set in order to maintain independence of the board, as well as to purposely bring in new talents to the board. But how do you know that you have an impending retirement of the board? So very simple techniques like check the age profile of your staff or your board members. Check the length of time your board member has been on the board. Check against your guidelines. Know where the gaps are. You also have long-serving, I call them long-serving board members, not overstayers. And especially if the person performs more than one role. Again, check the content. Can you replace this role immediately? Most of the time, some of the board members may hold roles that is difficult to replace immediately. So what do? You need to create, or you need to go and hunt for successors, 1:3 ratio. Next thing is, lastly and not least important, is really the financial oversight, the role of the treasurer. There is again a guideline of 4 years. But are we over-dependent on one person or a role as a board member, as a lead fundraiser? Does it mean that when we lose this lead fundraiser in the board, we lose our contact for funding? Again, this becomes very critical. Please think about that and set up your checklist. So here, I've just suggested this is a very, very simple one, which we just use just to, you can just pen, paper, Excel spreadsheet. You know who they are. You can just put down some demographics, which is exactly what Dr. Vasu suggested just now. Look at the demographics. When were they first appointed? What is the length of the tenure now? Do you think a change is needed? Questions like, are they always available to attend board and committee meetings? Questions like, do they have the talent to do what you want them to do? And then you have an action column. And this should be part of your regular, I would say, at least once a year nomination committee meeting. Or if you don't have a nomination committee, the secretary of the board should at least bring it to the chairman of the board to know and to monitor exactly the status and the demographics, the diversity of your board members, so that you can look at it and take certain actions. You can also discuss with your board members, and because you're going to take the actions quite ahead of time, your board members feel less stressed about whether they need to retire or they need to step down from certain committees. So really, the end is kickstart your succession planning. You must always be proactive. You have to start now. You can't say, oh, I'm going to do it tomorrow, I'm going to do it next week, I'm going to do it next year, I'm going to do it for my new board term. Really, the advice is start now. Get your demographics in order. Not forgetting that your board members can be burnt out. Always keep an open mind. You always consider diversity. There's always a lot of hidden gems. A lot of board members are volunteers. Don't forget your volunteers. Not forgetting, obviously, a lot of recommendations from current board members or retired board members. Importantly, make succession known to your networks. Work with your donors, work with your donor organizations. Sometimes donor and donor organizations may want to come in and help you. Why? They may want to recommend 1 to 2 of their staff to volunteer at your board because they want to do their own talent management. They want to bring in certain key people in order at the board level so that they train up their own people as well. So you can work with key organizations, key business federations to work out all this. Fourthly, continue to build an effective pipeline. You keep track of the achievements of those people that you want to bring in the board. It's like how you will always keep track of achievements of people whom you want to bring in as your CEO or as your key staff. You always keep track of them. You take note of the talent gaps in the board, as I've said just now. If you look at the strategic plans of your organization, and I hope that you do some strategic planning at least once in 2 years, it gives you a very, very good view of what are the gaps that you need to bring into the board, because these are the talents that bring you and your organization to the next higher level. Otherwise, how do you implement and achieve your required strategy? Management does look to the board to help them and give them some ideas on this. Transition plan, Dr. Vasu talked a lot about transition plan. I can't disagree with him more, or I must agree with him a lot. You have to think of a very, very well thought out transition plan. What are the list of activities and expectations that you want for the board? Do you have a time frame in which you say, look here, I want to bring in somebody to help us to oversee our IT committee? What is your time frame? Do you discuss with the fellow board members and your key management staff? Somebody asked a question, who is in charge? Well, generally the nominating committee is in charge if you do have a nominating committee. If not, there is the chairman. But do not underestimate the communication that you need to do with your internal stakeholders. Who are your internal stakeholders? Your management team. Management and the board must work very, very closely together. So your management team must be very, very comfortable with the new board member. Your new board members need to be properly oriented into what is the work of the organization that you're going to join, as well as continue to bond with fellow board members. This is just my last slide. I'm summarizing everything here. So basically there are 3 steps only. You need to prepare, you need to plan, and you need to develop. Whether it's for your board members or for your critical staff that you're doing succession planning for. It's really a preparation of 1 to 2 years. It's not that, in the next week, my board member is going to retire, I better find a new board member. Really, planning is required. Next thing, what are the key positions or the key talents that you want to bring into the board in order to help you to achieve your strategy? So from there, you can go around and hunt for them. Lastly, how do you prepare and develop talents? What are the external support structures that you require? And most importantly, who owns this process? Ownership of the process is always fundamental. If no one owns the process, nothing happens. So I would suggest really that it's the nominating committee that owns this whole process for succession planning of the board. Okay. Key takeaways, like I said, the nominating committee is in charge. Remember, volunteers are a great source, but don't push them away. Think about working with all your major donors. Develop a plan to co-develop their staff by having them on the board. You work also with the rest of your board members. They have fantastic networks. Not only Old Boys Club, they have a lot of other networks. Prepare your communication plan with your employees and external stakeholders, because you want your employees to also work very closely with your board members. And you build a systematic process. Identify people in charge. And lastly, always continue to improve this process. It's a process that can be continued to improve, but really start now. Thank you. So it's just a very, very quick one. I think over to you, Elsie.
I don't think it's a problem to have donors on your board if they are happy to donate and make your organization viable and contribute. It relieves the organization from looking for funding, because funding has become competitive. So donors can be there, but then you got to ensure that the donors got a role, and their role must be clear in the sense that they don't become owners of the organization, because the danger is that for some donors, they become owners of the organization, and then they may tend to muffle the participation and the interests of other members. So by having donors is a good thing, but donors must also have a clarity of their role. Otherwise, there will be complications, because
That's
you may
right.
have good people running away from your organization
Yep.
because they can't contribute,
Yep.
Well, you might as well have the donor carrying on to run the organization. Why should we be there, Yeah. So you have this
Tricky balance,
issue
right?
to address, yeah.
Lillian, any other?
Yes, that's right. When I suggested donor, I'm only suggesting donor as one source of board succession. There's just one source. You have your federations, you have got your CMPL, but fundamentally, my suggestion is, in order to make board succession a process that the board members will always think about is really work out with some of your key stakeholders, like I said, CMPL, and develop the process so that you can work a one-on-one and the board members, and you find the right board members. So right board members sometimes need not be volunteers. We always think of the volunteer, but there are also board members whom organizations want to develop. And organizations want to develop because they want to develop their own talent. So by becoming a board member helps the organization who is giving you that volunteer as well. So I think there is a lot of good relationship that can be developed with other organizations.
Okay, next question. How would it be when sometimes you have they have difficulties in getting people to step up to become chairman because people don't feel that they have the commitment at the time to spare for that. What would be some of your suggestions in terms of how you can encourage people to step up?
Step up to be taking over as a chairman?
Yes.
So you must make sure that people are really willing horses, Sometimes we tend to push them onto it because we think that they should be able to do the task. We try and corner them such because we think that they have the capacity. I think it's very important, therefore, to ensure that there is adequate induction, there is adequate sort of that the person itself must feel that they are ready for the job, Are they ready or not? Do they have the capacity or not? Do they have the time or not? So it's a whole self-evaluation process, because this is not a paid job, And if you're taking on a job, a task of the organization, then one must feel morally responsible. There is this capacity to evaluate, self-evaluate, whether you can commit yourself given the time that you have. Maybe some people may not have the time for a start, but they are able to make for more time in due course. So to me, I think it's very important to be able to provide an opportunity for the person to step up to reflect whether they can take the responsibility or not.
Any further inputs, Lillian?
Yeah, I think what Dr. Vasu shared is really very correct. It's really whether the person wants to be able to do it, because you can't, and number one. Number two is really also to the other members of the board. A chairman can't work in isolation. The other members of the board must also support him so that he can also become an effective chairman. So it's really it's all for one. It's not one chairman and that's it. It's all for one. So I think so it's not so simple, and really time is of the essence. So some people may feel that they either don't have the capability or they don't have the time to do this, because it's a lot of commitment to the values of the organization that you're serving.
That actually brings us to a point that, you know, it probably is a full range of charities and non-profit organizations that has different constitutions possibly. Something like, for instance, in Rotary, for that matter, when we are having our own clubs, we actually run it, you know, such that every year there's renewal. Every year there's new president.
Yes.
So, you know, whereas in some charities, it's very much helmed by the founding member, and that's the passion that flows through. And the question then, you know, at the end of the day is this issue with overstayers. And I think that, you know, one of the another question that was asked is, what are the valid reasons then for overstayers? For instance, if they are founding members, you know, can they overstay for that matter and still balance maybe the board, you know, with new members that they can introduce so as to continue to innovate and bring in the young and the new, but yet, you know, you always have a few anchor who can stay for as long as possible. Because I think that the other point that was raised is no more than 10 years, right? You know, so so is that something that's a mandatory? Is it just a guideline for that matter over 10 years?
I think, Elsie, just in response, nothing wrong with overstayers. You know, overstayers may be resourceful, or overstayers may be proactive. They can contribute. They have the capacity, the network. But I think one has to be very careful of what type of overstayers you have. Overstayers who are destructive, overstayers that are obstructive, overstayers that don't want to change, overstayers that don't contribute at all to the organization, and then they are causing disruption, obstruction to the organization in bringing about change. So one has got to be very careful how to discern, how to discriminate, how to counsel this overstayer that, you know, you are obstructing too much the work of the organization. Somebody has got to deal with it. So I think we shouldn't label them as overstayers, because once you start labeling them, you know, then people with human dignity, why should I, you know, these people are thinking that I'm overstaying and I'm no good, you know, and then people get disappointed with the setup. We must value, you know, people who are willing to contribute. The question is how to redeploy them, how to harness their capacity, how to provide them the dignity that they can still continue to serve. I think that's very important. All of us have human dignity. And in voluntary work and working in organization, there's this, the need for self-actualization. You want to feel that you are able to contribute. You are valued, you know. And if I'm not valued, you know, if I go there to the meeting, to the board, half the time I'm made very small, I feel that I've got no contribution to make, and then people devalue me. Why should I be associated with your organization? I might as well go somewhere, work with an organization that respects me and value me. I think that's important.
That's very important. Anything else?
Yeah, I think I agree, Dr. Vasu. There isn't a label of overstaying. I would say that it depends. Sometimes it also depends on how the chairman of the board handles this. You know, in terms of, is he very strict on a specific time frame for the board in order to pursue the agenda of board renewal? That's one. Secondly is, in handling overstayers or people, I wouldn't say overstayers, I'll say that people whom you think have been on the board for quite some time. Really, what we have done is, in Rensil, is we have continued them on our subcommittees because we feel that they continue to have a lot of value. They are very, very committed, very, very passionate to what the board and the company is doing. So why not let them continue? But not necessarily at the board level. They can continue to contribute at the subcommittee level. But obviously, this needs to be handled very delicately by the chairman, so that the person or the board member is aware of what is happening to him.
Fantastic. And
Yeah.
now I think we have time for one last question. There's one that came across to us, fellow charity and social work, social service sector friends, about whether there is this over-governance that's happening now. Because there's overemphasis, on such that, because of reporting requirements, processes, and so on, that it discourages new or potential board entrants or volunteers to step up. Do you feel that there's been a change such that, there's more emphasis on governance, and because of that, less are willing to step up because of that?
I think we have to be very careful there, because you are in we are dealing with organizations, human organizations, and then too much reporting for the sake of reporting, submitting papers, submitting requirements, which are more than necessary, to assess the health of the organization. Somehow, I think there should be somewhere in which people can do an external audit of the organizations and see whether the organization is viable, doing the things it's supposed to do. There's an internal process through which they can audit themselves, and then they can assess whether the organization is socially healthy, is capable of achieving its mission, its objective, is cost effective. All this, I think, essentially necessary for the board. But if we impose too many requirements, sometimes you have to submit, say, audit report every 3 months or so, and then, like some companies and all that, 6 monthly audit that you got to do. And then you got to do sustainability report, all these other things, which is going to cost money, cost time for the organization. When it's obvious that you can see through the various approaches, the audit report, the audit, whether it's a financial audit or social audit that you do, if you are able to ensure that the organization is healthy, then one should not have too exacting, too much bureaucracy. People get tired of this, that imposition of regulation, over-regulation, I think, is, to me, becomes a bit bad. Hak Sing will be able to tell, since she is there in corporate governance, what do you expect to be a minimum standard?
In place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elsie, since Prof mentioned my name, perhaps I can do a little bit of my insight. I've been listening to all the questions. My first point of view is this, is that you join the charities and you join the social sectors, not because you're there for personal reason. You join the charity or join the people sectors because it's a belief in a cause. Therefore, while your loyalty is with the board and the chairman, but your biggest loyalty is to your mission and purpose. And therefore, if, for example, the chairman decided to overstay, or the chairman brings somebody who is not popular to the board, then I think as a member of the board, you have the right to bring it up. And if the chairman decided to overrule you, then you have the choice to leave. But it's your right also to tell people your reason for leaving. Why I bring all these things up to you is that it's important that this is about a choice. The second part is regarding to whether over-regulation or under-regulation. When I first took over a job as a regulator, the newspaper put my policeman picture and I got a shock. Because what I given to the newspaper was me in People Association as a community leader. Why I say this? Because a regulator, like the Charity Commissioner, it's not only about building a trusted environment, but it's also about building a thriving charities, which means to say that I'm both a regulator and a promoter. And the job of a promoting is not to be underestimated. So that's why I have a phrase to say that I walk the journey with you. So as a regulator, why should I walk the journey with you? I just, hide among the bush. As something happens, I pound on you. No. I prefer to build the capacity in you so that together, more trust, together there's more donation, together we can help more people. That must be the bigger mission and purpose. So, and I think that is what this government is all about. You look at all the regulators that we have, most of us are playing this role of empowerment and as an enabler. Mm. There's question regarding to whether overstayer or the right to overstay. I will say this. If you believe in best practices tell us that when a person stays for too long, majority of the time, then things get stagnant. Okay? But I have no doubt that they are contributing, but it's just that you stay, the environment is changing. Today we're dealing with a very changing world. So I agree in some instance with Dr. Vasu that if the overstayer still continue to contribute, we should allow. Yes, but perhaps in a different role. After 10 years, I think we should allow the system to refresh. In other words, to say that one of the failure of many NPO sector is about the fear to refresh. And one of the lever to refresh is about changing the chairman. And therefore, if you believe in this theory, then you will have a term limit. The other advantage of having a term limit is that when the chairman steps down, is also face saving in a sense. Why? Because the chairman stepped down not because he's not doing well, but because it's a best practice. So in that way, the 10 years so-called limit itself is also a system that you build in to create refresh in the systems. But I agree with Dr. Vasu. There are instances whereby the chairman should stay after 10 years, because the dynamic, simply the organization is not ready for change. But it must be an exception, not a norm. Right? I mean, this is not only a charity practice, it's also a corporate practice, if I'm not mistaken. If you ask SID, is there a term limit? They will tell you, yes, there's also a term limit. Okay, so I thought I just want to address this. I think I'll stop here. Otherwise I will deliver.
Otherwise you'll be charged for hogging, hogging your place. But anyway, just to say that it is quite easy in organizations when you're looking at succession planning. It's easy to deal with clinical things, I mean, the number of years, what positions you hold, how long you hold, are you in that position, whether it's treasurer, vice president, secretary, or whatever it is. And organizations have clear-cut structure and tenure and what have you. It's to deal with structures is very simple, straightforward, very much what do you call numeric clinical direction. But then I think the question we have to think about is how do we prepare for succession in a humanistic way, and then how do we ensure that there is this human dignity, because he's a volunteer, he's given his time, he spent a lot of his effort in trying to help the organization through difficult period, do challenging time, and then how to therefore help him retire gracefully, or to step aside or step up. I should say that he should be stepped up, given the recognition, be a patron or be an advisor or be a consultant or whatever it is, you can think of it, and he can still contribute. He need not have to, he can be a resource to the board. And if an organization is able to do that, I think it is a very effective, caring, supportive organization that has a place for people, and then think how to engage people in the best way they can. I think that's an important thing that we have to reflect about in succession planning.
Okay, I think that, we have so many value inputs, and the discussion can go on for another forum and workshop actually. So for those of you who are interested, Lilian will actually be doing a workshop actually on this topic, and it will dive, in further. This details can be found on our RLIS website. And I think that you can actually, dive in more deeply into something which is related to your charity specifically, or your organization specifically, at the workshop.
For the participants, I have written a small paper which I've given to CNPL.
Great.
And if any of the participants are interested, they can always pick up from CNPL. Yep. And they can glean through it, and hopefully it does give you an insight in doing things better, and helping your organization to plan its succession in an effective way.
Yes, in fact, actually the presentation deck will be shared, right, to everyone. And if that's the case, maybe, this particular paper can also be shared as well. I think that would be something which is valued and very much of interest to all participants. So without the next thing I would like is to invite Kitson to do his closing address.
Thank you so much, Elsie. Well, my fellow nonprofit leaders, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on such a really heavy topic as such succession planning for our boards. Dr. Ang, in his opening address, has also mentioned the importance of having innovation and the lack of innovation due to the overstayers. Well, one good news is that if you have overstayers on your board, please refer them to CNPL, because we do have a lot of charities as well that are really looking for experienced board members to help them in their areas, not only in governance, but also to help these nonprofits into how do I move from a charity to an IPC status. Or we also have ground-ups that need such expertise to really help them to move into becoming a better charity. So please send them to us. We will be happy to extend this invite to them to also help us build these charities together. So thank you so much, Dr. Ang. And Dr. Vasu has shared with us also on the human dimension. I think that is something very, very important. And two things that I took away as well as what he mentioned is that board members are also volunteers. So what is important is really the respect and the value. So thank you so much, Dr. Vasu, for sharing with us this afternoon as well. And of course, Lilian, you have given us really the insights of proactive. And I believe Lilian has also touched on two very important points for succession planning is start now and be proactive. In fact, all our three speakers have touched on that as well. Thank you so much, Lilian. And of course, to Elsie for helping us to moderate the session. Now, at the Center for Nonprofit Leadership, to ensure that you do have a good succession planning pipeline, you may be pleased to note that we do have this board match program that we have offered. All right, and that is where we are able to find the best fit candidates for you, all right, to help you become a better charity. As what I said earlier on as well, you have experienced board members, please share them with us so that we can help to capability build the entire sector together. Good things must share, don't keep to yourself. And more importantly as well, in terms of board diagnostics, how well your board performs, how well we work together. All right, that is where we actually have a board diagnostic tool, the Power Check, and this is something very critical. All right, how often do the boards do your own evaluation? And you may be pleased to know that since you joined us for this afternoon, we are offering this free of charge for you. All right, up to 31st December. However, it's up to 100 sign-ups only. All right. So do consider these options available for you so that, as what Dr. Ang mentioned, there's no more excuse to say I have no candidates or no chemistry, no right chemistry. All right. We provide that in CNPL. And of course, you want detailed courses, you can also go to SID, SSI, as well as Rotary Learning Institute Singapore. All right. So that's all I have for all my fellow nonprofit leaders. Let's continue to journey together, as what Dr. Ang said, and together we can build a better nonprofit sector together. Over to you, Elsie.
Yes, thank you again, CNPL, Gibson, and team, for this opportunity for RLIS, to work with you. Very privileged to have speakers like Dr. Ang, Dr. Wasu, and our very own Lillian to contribute today. RLIS is a division of the Foundation of Rotary Clubs Singapore as a registered charity. We offer a wide range of causes also to engage with the community and empower participants from all walks of life to enhance their skills. Our mission is to offer learning programs for the community to serve better. So we look forward, to more collaboration. And thank you very much, for joining us today. Thank you.